NBA players that you would legitimately buy a ticket for to go watch because you find them entertaining.
Ben Simmons, because I would want to learn how you can make $80 million and play 55 games. Teach me.
I think people forget, me as a player when I'm healthy. I could play basketball. I'm pretty good, right?
Ben Simmons was touted as a generational talent coming out of LSU. A big man that could play the 1 through 5 and was dominant in the paint offensively and defensively. Ben Simmons' skill set had him compared to the likes of Magic Johnson for his incredible basketball IQ and court vision. But less than a decade later, Ben Simmons finds himself on the bench fighting for any playing time that he can get. But unfortunately, that's only when he's healthy. What happened to Ben Simmons? How good was he in his prime? Will we ever get to see a healthy prime Ben Simmons again? Or is he just another failed player who refused to put in the work necessary to stay at the top? Before we get to the content, make sure you drop, like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to support this channel. And now that we get all of that out of the way, cue the intro. So Stephon Diggs is out for the season, and the Houston Texans were without Nico Collins on Sunday Night Football when they faced off against the Detroit Lions, which meant that Tank Dell was going to see more targets. The problem? I had no idea who the Texans wide receiver 2 was going to be, which made it very difficult to project receiving yards at the very beginning of the game. Now, as Sunday Night Football started, we saw John Mechie explode for over 65 receiving yards in the beginning, so at halftime, I decided to take advantage of this. I went on PrizePicks to check his live projection and saw that he only needed 6 more receiving yards in the second half for his square to hit. And based off of the flow of the game, you didn't need to be a genius to know this was going to work. So I also saw that David Montgomery only needed 15 more rush yards in the second half for his square to hit. So I decided to test the waters with my first live pick and made an easy $60. Now, if you want to take advantage of this brand new feature, make sure you download PrizePicks and use my promo code microphone to get a free $50 when you make a play of $5 or more. And if you followed me on Instagram, you would have seen this projection on my story. But since it's a live projection, I highly recommend turning on my story notification so you get them immediately. And thank you, PrizePicks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Ben Simmons was one of the most highly touted prospects coming out of college in a very long time. He was the #1 recruit in Florida after averaging a very impressive double-double, 28 points and 12 rebounds per game, while also putting up incredible defensive numbers of over 4 stocks per game, which resulted him in committing to LSU. There, he was hands down the most exciting recruit in LSU history since Shaq, and he lived up to the potential, averaging over 19 points per game, an SEC leading 11.8 rebounds per game, and nearly 5 assists per game. And in one particular game against North Florida, Simmons even managed to put up a 43-point double-double, which landed him in history books. Ben Simmons became the only major conference player in the last 20 years to put up a 40-point, 10-rebound, 5-assist, 5-steal stat line. He did all this while shooting 75% from the field, but even back then, he didn't shoot any threes, and this would become a problem throughout his career. But during his collegiate career, he still was able to average 3 blocks per game, which was something that followed him into the NBA. Even though Simmons was the best player in the country, LSU would not be good enough to make the NCAA tournament. However, Ben Simmons still went home with multiple All-American honors, the SEC Rookie of the Year award, and the only reason he didn't win the Wooden Award for Best Basketball Player in the Nation is because he didn't meet the requirement of having a GPA over 2.0. Despite his outstanding performance, there was still some doubters, most notably the former executive vice president of the NBA, Stu Jackson, who had this to say.
There's just something about, the way that Simmons has either handled himself or been handled by his camp that gives me a little bit cause for pause, just in terms of whether or not mentally and personally he's actually ready to make this jump to the NBA level. I just am a little bit hesitant with what I know as to whether or not, he's ready to step onto this stage under this microscope in the NBA and get better and perform.
Now, despite this warning from Stu Jackson, Ben Simmons would still declare for the NBA draft, and whether it was good or bad, the rest was history. With this pick, Ben Simmons Simmons made even more history, becoming the first college basketball player in NCAA history to be drafted #1 overall, despite the fact that he never played in the NCAA tournament. And the selection was simple. Ben Simmons was supposed to be the next Magic Johnson, a player that had a similar skill set as LeBron James did, but didn't possess the same athleticism. But the comparisons made sense. LeBron James entered the NBA with tremendous size, an incredible basketball IQ, and an imposing frame that should result in easy baskets inside the paint. However, there were some questions about his abilities as a shooter, which clearly throughout his career he worked on and addressed. So for the most part, the LeBron James comparisons actually made a lot of sense in the case of Ben Simmons. And after making this history, Simmons would continue making history in his NBA career and would be put in record books alongside multiple Hall of Famers for very good and very bad reasons. After being drafted to the 76ers, Ben Simmons would end up fracturing a bone in his foot on September 30th during the 76ers final training camp scrimmage. To make matters even worse, Simmons would end up missing the entire 2016 to 2017 season after it was announced that the bone in his foot was not healing properly, which, funny enough, was similar to what happened with his co-star Joel Embiid when he was drafted. But this didn't set Ben Simmons and the 76ers back, as just a year later in Simmons' rookie season, he had an electric debut. And he wasn't just good for a rookie, he was historically amazing. In Ben Simmons' rookie season, he ended up finishing second all-time for most triple-doubles by a rookie, even passing Magic Johnson and finishing right behind another Hall of Famer in Oscar Robertson, as he ended up winning the Rookie of the Year award. In this historic stretch, Ben Simmons ended up putting up a triple-double consisting of 27 points, 15 rebounds, 13 assists, and 4 steals in a victory over the Cleveland Cavaliers. In the playoffs that season, Ben Simmons became the first rookie in NBA history to record a triple-double in the playoffs since Magic Johnson did it in 1980. Although they would end up losing to the Boston Celtics in the second round, the young superstar duo of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid were destined for greatness. During the offseason, Ben Simmons ended up working out with his brother, who was a coach at the University of California, to develop his jump shot. This made sense because although Ben Simmons was dominant in basically every facet of the game, the one aspect he lacked was a quality jump shot, as evidenced by the fact that he didn't make a single three-pointer in his rookie season. And in his sophomore season, Ben Simmons kept on making history, becoming the second fastest player behind Oscar Robertson to record 2,000 points, 1,000 rebounds, and 1,000 assists, beating notable names such as Magic Johnson and, at this point, his friend LeBron James, who in an Instagram caption even called Ben Simmons the Fresh Prince and the future of the NBA. In this season, Simmons would achieve his first All-Star selection of his career, and in the playoffs ended up underperforming as he averaged just 13.9 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, and less than 2.5 stocks per game, as they would lose to the eventual NBA champion Toronto Raptors in Game 7 of the second round in probably the most heartbreaking fashion in NBA history. Before Ben Simmons' third season could begin, he signed a max contract with the 76ers to stay in Philadelphia for the long term. The only issue being this contract would become one of the biggest albatrosses in sports history, and it's for reasons that no one could have expected. You see, whenever a player like Ben Simmons is set for a contract extension, whenever you are hoping that he could blossom into a superstar in the NBA, it's no question that he does get the rookie max contract extension. But in his first season with the new contract, Ben Simmons would reach career highs while also reaching career lows. Something that would consistently follow Ben Simmons throughout his career was his lack of a three-pointer. Even the late great Kobe Bryant warned Ben Simmons.
This question, how far can Ben Simmons go?
Well, he's got to get a jump shot. It's like, it sounds humorous and all that, but I'm dead ass serious. Yeah. You can't, because if not, he'll regret it. When his career is over.
But still, Simmons would make his second straight All-Star appearance while being named to the All-NBA third team and All-Defensive first team. But more notably, he also made the first three-pointer of his career, and you have to hear the reaction from the crowd and the announcer.
Average three-point shooter, there's Simmons! Yes! He did it! He hits the three, his first, and his NBA career.
It had taken Ben Simmons 172 career NBA games to finally hit his first three. He and the 76ers were on top of the world. However, he would come crashing down back to earth as in the middle of the season, Simmons would suffer a nerve impingement in his back and would miss 8 games before the NBA season was shut down due to COVID. Now, 8 games might not seem like a lot, but when you consider Simmons had missed just 4 games over the last 2 seasons, it begins to put the situation into perspective. Ben Simmons was healthy when the NBA bubble began months later, however would suffer a knee injury just a few games into the resumed season and would be forced to miss the 76ers bubble playoff run as he was getting surgery done in his knee. In what would be Ben Simmons' 4th and final season with the Philadelphia 76ers, he was selected to his 3rd straight All-Star appearance while even receiving MVP votes and finishing 2nd in Defensive Player of the Year voting. Simmons would miss time throughout the season mainly due to soreness in the knee that he had surgery on, but didn't miss a significant stretch of games, managing to be healthy for the 76ers playoff run. In the second round of the playoffs, the 76ers had managed to take the Atlanta Hawks to 7 games. In Game 7, the 76ers had managed to keep the score relatively close, but in the words of Joel Embiid, the momentum shifted after Ben Simmons made a crucial error.
I'll be honest, I thought the turning point was just, we had an open shot and, we made one free throw and we missed the other, and then they came down and scored.
The play Embiid is referring to is when Ben Simmons had a wide open dunk but decided to pass to Matisse Thybulle, who obviously wasn't prepared for the pass as he expected Simmons to dunk the ball, and as a result, Matisse was fouled. After this, the Hawks would go on a run to win the game 103-96. This might have seemed like a one-off play to casual fans, but this one play was the embodiment of what was wrong with Ben Simmons' style of basketball. Too often, Ben Simmons would play passively despite the fact that he had the capability of taking over the basketball game, and the fact that he was completely rattled in these types of situations. A player that was your franchise cornerstone needed to be capable of taking over in these moments, and the fact that Ben Simmons had gone this long without developing a jump shot and was not shooting wide open shots, whether they were mid-range shots, layups, or dunks, was very concerning to Philadelphia 76ers fans. There's no question that Ben Simmons had the potential of being a top 5 offensive player in basketball, but for some reason he preferred to coast off of his natural talent and be more of a top 20 offensive player, which severely limited his playing style and the potential of the Philadelphia 76ers. After this career-altering Game 7 elimination, Doc Rivers did him no favors. Doc Rivers isn't necessarily known for holding himself accountable. As a matter of fact, he's more known for deflecting blame onto others. So when Doc Rivers was asked whether or not Ben Simmons could be a starting point guard on a championship roster, his reaction was just as you expected.
Ben Simmons can still be a point guard for a championship team like the one you guys want to become?
Yeah, David, I don't know that question or the answer to that right now. So I don't know the answer to that.
Years later, in an interview, Doc Rivers had this to say about Ben, and it truly reveals the character of Ben Simmons.
Ben was frustrated in a whole different way. Just the mental part, the health part, the injury part, just the work ethic part. I mean, all those things.
It must be tough to coach somebody that you don't know if they love basketball. And I wondered if Ben loved basketball or he was just good at basketball.
Yeah, I would say I agree with that. I've always said this. The playoff always exposes guys who really love it because the pressure of the playoffs and the intensity of the games, if you don't absolutely love it, it will eat you up. Like, he is a freak of nature, athletically, body-wise, vision-wise, but the rest of the part wasn't there.
In this quote, Doc Rivers, who is Ben Simmons' former coach, is basically saying despite the fact that Ben Simmons had a gift from God athletically and IQ-wise, he simply did not care enough to get better at basketball or be as dominant as he could have been. After this Game 7 debacle, Ben Simmons would end up holding out while requesting a trade from the organization, and in the process missed training camp, practices, walkthroughs, basically anything that was mandatory to be attended, Simmons would miss, and as a result, the Philadelphia 76ers fined him for everything. In late October, Ben Simmons would finally show up to a 76ers practice in order to stop the fines, but after refusing to participate in a drill, Doc Rivers kicked him out of practice, and the Philadelphia 76ers suspended him for a game. After this event, Joel Embiid took to the media once again to call out Simmons.
I'm really focused on the guys that are here. The situation is weird, disappointing, borderline kind of disrespectful to all the guys that are out here. But at the end of the day, our job is not to babysit somebody, get paid a We're just on the court, go out, play hard, win some games. That's all we get paid for. We don't get paid to come out here and, try to babysit somebody.
In the eyes of Joel Embiid, he was right. Missing everything just to finally show up to practice, then refuse to do anything is weird and disrespectful. But maybe looking at the situation through Ben Simmons' eyes could shed some light on where he was coming from in that moment.
Getting kicked out of that practice that day, I actually spoke to Doc before practice. I was like, Doc, I'm not ready. And mentally, I'm not ready. Please just understand that. I tried to let him know prior. And he was like, well, I'm going to put you in anyway. I'm like, all right. Told me to get in. I was like, I looked at him like, it was like 1 minute into practice. Like, man, get in. I'm like, no one's doing that. You're doing this on purpose. It seems like everyone's just trying to me now. Like I'm getting fined for like not lifting weights, but physically I'm like one of the strongest guys on the fucking team. So I'm like, now they're finding me for little things. And obviously I didn't handle things the right way, but also the team didn't either.
After this, Ben Simmons continued to hold out in hopes of being traded to a new team. And after mentioning to the 76ers that his holdout was mental health related, the 76ers stopped finding him. However, just a month later, the 76ers would resume finding him after he refused to attend the 76ers mandated therapy sessions. These fines ended up accumulating to the point that in this one season, Ben Simmons became the most fined player in NBA history. During all this, Ben Simmons was still receiving medical treatment for his back, and in mid-February, the 76ers ended up trading him to the Brooklyn Nets in a package to acquire James Harden. Years after, LeBron James called Ben Simmons the Fresh Prince. Ben Simmons finally fulfilled his destiny and left Philadelphia. Once he went to Brooklyn, it was discovered that Ben Simmons' back injury was so serious that he needed season-ending back surgery. Since coming to Brooklyn, Ben Simmons has been with the team for 3 seasons, playing just 65 total games with the team, meaning he has played less than a full season since coming to the Nets. Originally, the hope was Ben Simmons would team up with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant and try to use his defense to stop players like Giannis Antetokounmpo or Jason Tatum in the playoffs. But despite the Brooklyn Nets begging Ben Simmons to check in to Game 6 of their first-round matchup against the Celtics for just 5 minutes, Ben Simmons would refuse. Despite this, Ben Simmons would have some big moments with the Brooklyn Nets. For instance, in January of 2023, his first season with the team, he recorded his first triple-double in 2 years against the San Antonio Spurs. Since then, Ben Simmons has been plagued with multiple knee and back injuries, which seem to flare up every season. Although he did record that one triple-double, Ben Simmons has been a shell of his former self since going to Brooklyn. He averaged less than 7 points, rebounds, and assists in his 65-game tenure with Brooklyn, and in the final year of his contract, it's unlikely that he signs an extension with the team. The problem with having Ben Simmons on the roster is whenever you have a player that takes up that much of your salary but is producing so little, there's no chance for you to compete. So despite the Nets having a fairly solid roster to compete with players like Mikal Bridges and Dorian Finney-Smith and Cameron Johnson, they were essentially forced into a rebuild just because of Ben Simmons. And to give you an idea of how terrible he's been, in the current 2024-25 season, despite Chris Brickley telling all of us that Ben Simmons was going to come back stronger this year, he's been benched in favor of Dennis Schroeder, Cam Thomas, and Nick Claxton. It's really hard to sum up Ben Simmons' tenure with the Brooklyn Nets, but Stephen A. Smith puts it bluntly, but perfectly right here.
Nobody is worse than Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons might also be the weakest, most pathetic excuse for a professional athlete we have ever seen in the history of sports. I can't think of a professional athlete that has come across more pathetic than this man.
Now, this might look like the end for Ben Simmons, however, he is still relatively young, and there is still a path for him to make it in the NBA, but that depends on one question. Ben Simmons will be an unrestricted free agent for the very first time in his career after this current season, and there are a few things that could not only save his NBA career, but catapult him back into stardom. The first thing is, he really just needs to care more. Of course, Ben Simmons has been injury plagued, and that's not entirely his fault. If an athlete gets injured, that's just bad luck. And in the case of Ben Simmons, it seems that he's been plagued by chronic knee and back injuries, and that's not something he can permanently solve. However, the case of his work ethic and love of the game of basketball is something that he can solve. If Ben Simmons can reignite his love for the game of basketball, the very same thing that made him a basketball phenom in Florida, then he has the opportunity to become one of the best players in the NBA like he was in Philadelphia. But that's something that has to come from within, and based off of what we've seen so far, it's kind of difficult to believe in him at this point. But let's say he does figure that out. What does Ben Simmons do next? The second thing Ben Simmons needs to succeed is a coach that is willing to spend extra time with him. As previously mentioned, Ben Simmons will become a free agent this offseason, and instead of signing for whatever team offers him the most money, he should instead sign with the team that has the best cultural fit for him, and a coach that is willing to work with him personally. My top pick for Ben Simmons in free agency is going to probably be the Miami Heat, especially if they retain Jimmy Butler. The Miami Heat have a track record of getting the absolute best out of their players, so I think this is a no-brainer. Ben Simmons has a ton of untapped potential, and he is still going to be in his 20s next season. In order to unlock that potential, he's going to need to find someone to help him find that third gear that he could lock into. Have we seen the last of Ben Simmons? No, but we have seen the last of Ben Simmons as a max contract player. It's truly sad because whenever you look at Ben Simmons' highlight tape from his rookie season or his sophomore season, one can just wonder what could have been if this young man locked in a little bit more, if he was a little bit more mentally strong, if he actually attempted to improve his game. But alas, instead, all we can wonder is what if in this particular instance, and just watch where his career takes him now. Let me know what you guys think about Ben Simmons' career in the comment section down below. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.